Here we are again. Can't believe it. Another beautiful day in Massachusetts. Still won't warm up. Unbelievable. But, you know, we're here. Inside, where it's nice and warm. So we should read some Reddit. So, the week I've been having, I've been doing this blood donation for research thing, and it means that my low back and hips are freaking out because I've been making so much white blood cells, which a lot of people may not know this. White blood cells are made in bones, and that's what bone marrow does. Bone marrow makes blood stuff, and when you take a drug that makes you produce more, it makes it feel like your bones are gonna pop. So it goes to show you that even somebody who takes perfect care of themselves most of the time, even, you know, sometimes pain's unavoidable in some ways, you know, but, you know, here we are. But here's the first question. This one's in our back pain. Classic chiropractic stalking ground, shall we say. Took me 1.5 years to find solution and 6 months to work on it. Get rid of back pain. Again, sometimes I wonder if I just can't read or if the grammar's just not good. It's probably both. To be completely honest, it's probably both. So it goes. I've been reading posts here for a while, and so I want to share what helped me since I'm doing much better now. I'm 29 and a software dev, and been working fully remote for 4 years. And so most of my day was spent sitting and then more sitting after work. So 2 years ago, pain started as a dull ache in my lower right back and used to get worse throughout the day. That's good. That's a good mechanism. That's a good bit of history there. I'm glad he brought that up. That would have been one of the first questions I'd asked. And by evening, I unable to sit comfortably at all. I tried a chiropractor for a few months, and while it did feel good for a bit, but pain would always come back. I even bought a pretty expensive chair thinking it would fix things, but I don't know. The aggressive lumbar support made it worse. But then brother's girlfriend recommended I should see sports physio. She explained that my lower back wasn't the problem. It was just taking all the load. Sitting all day made my hip flexors tight, glutes inactive, and upper back stiff. So my lower back was kind of overworking to compensate. And so she told me that instead of focusing on my lower back, I start doing simple stuff daily like glute bridges or dead bugs and hip flexor stretches and some backward walking. Ooh, that's a good one. Actually, that's a great idea, actually. I never thought to tell somebody to walk backwards. That's a really good idea. That's why I like reading these. Even I learn stuff sometimes. Around 20 minutes every morning before work. Also told me that stretching alone won't help much if the right muscles aren't active first. She also suggested adding low-impact cardio that works the posterior chain. I started rowing for 10 to 15 minutes. Went with rowing mainly because I had my brother's Mureck rowing machine. I can make a separate post on cardio that works for posterior chains and things I learned from physio. Other things that helped, adding short movement breaks during work and doing quick stretches between meetings. And yeah, being consistent with whatever you do. And with that, after about 6 months, I'm mostly pain-free. Hope this helps someone. So let's begin. Let's begin the dissection. So starting from the very first, obviously this person is still pretty young, 29. Generally speaking, when someone's in their 20s, you can do a lot of things that your back probably doesn't really enjoy and get away with it. A lot of times in the 20s, that definitely used to be the case. I guess in the previous decade or whatever, but the current generation, just because we've been trained to sit as much as we do, it's a little, I think the age of back pain type related stuff due to lifestyle is probably getting, there is no probably, it's definitely getting younger and younger in my opinion. It's mostly just because of sedentary behavior, which this obviously goes straight into, because this person works as a fully remote software developer, which means they sit in front of a computer all day. And that's just a recipe for pain, and it could just potentially be a disaster for that poor low back. Sitting is the silent killer for humans in general. It's definitely the case for Americans, just because the current lifestyle that we live here involves a lot of long hours of just sitting in one spot, hunched over some kind of electrical device. Just the way that you make money to pay your bills. I don't think it's anybody's fault, really. Something I always like to think about is it's not necessarily your fault, but it is your problem. And I think that this is a great post that kind of elaborates on that concept, because he did take it, or I say he, it could be she. I don't think it said that if he was a male or not, but this person was able to conquer their own issue, even though they weren't specifically doing something wrong, shall we say. Like, obviously, sitting all day at working is not good, but it's very manageable. And I think that this post does a good job of elucidating some of the ideas that you can do throughout the day that help you get through this kind of issue. And everybody can do it. There's nothing in here that I don't think anybody can't do. All of the things that this person suggested. I'm just gonna say he, but I'm fully aware that it could be a she, just so I can remove that part of this discussion out of my brain so that I can stop being stupid. This person, he, is obviously obviously able to take care of their problem, and it didn't require anything like wildly out of like left field. Everything in here is like super basic stuff, and it goes to show you, even to the detriment of my own profession, chiropractors are very, very good for dealing with low back pain. But it does sound like the chiropractor that he was going to was not suggesting any rehab type things to do at home, which I will say is definitely one detriment to the chiropractic profession, is that there's a lot of passive care, but they do tend to forget about doing more of an active care role, which I do think is a huge area of improvement for our profession. There's a lot of chiros out there that I think would make the argument that it is our job to do the passive care, and then it is physios, which again is like a European term for physical therapist, for anybody who may not know what a physio is. They're usually like they're much more like movement based in regards to like working out. I think there's a lot of chiros out there that think that it's not necessarily like our job. Like we're going into like personal philosophy here as far as like chiropractic goes. I think a lot of chiros say, well, we adjust the back and all that, and the PTs and physios, they handle the exercise stuff. Which, I mean, in a perfectly integrated medical society, that might be the way to do it. I do think that that drastically increases the cost to the patient, just because now they have to go to two specialists who are going to give like kind of overlapping information. At least they potentially could. There's a lot of argument to be, or not a lot of argument, but there's a very big discussion point, I think, for patients who are either more driven or they do better with supervision. If you are the type of person that, and there's nothing wrong with this, if there's the type of person that just will not work out on their own, or they do not want to do the exercises on their own because they get distracted when they go home, because, you know, they got to make dinner or they got to take care of the kids, whatever it happens to be, whatever. And I'm not going to use those as like quote unquote excuses, but there's definitely a lot of things that take up your bandwidth and they'll distract you from doing, 10 minutes of whatever stretch or exercise it is that you're supposed to do. If you're the kind of person who just can't do it, then I think going to a PT, even if you're seeing a chiro, is really, really good. There are some chiros out there who are a little bit more boutique, I guess, a little bit more like specialized. Like, I guess I don't know, maybe I'm not entirely sure what the correct word might be, but a little bit more like concierge type PT or chiros, where they're actually able to go through physical therapy type exercises with you because they have the time to do that. Most mom pop, which I'm not entirely sure that's an appropriate, I don't think very many moms and pops owns chiro clinics, but I think most chiro clinics are primarily focused on spinal hygiene type stuff, especially when it comes to like nerve interference and all that stuff. And they'll give you exercises to do. We'll give you printouts and all that. But a lot of times that the schedule's a little bit too packed to be able to give people the amount of time it would take to do more than just like an example of an exercise. So if you go to like the chiro and they're like, hey, you should do dead bugs, I can show you what a dead bug is. And these are some of the things that you should do. Here's a piece of, here's instructions on how to do it at home, blah, blah, blah. And for some people, that's fine. And some people, that's enough, because after they get shown how to do it, they can do it at home, and then there's no problem. And in which case, the chiropractor was exactly what they needed, because they get the added benefit of moving the spinal segments while also learning the ways to stabilize the muscles to keep it from wanting to go back. And again, this kind of goes into that personal philosophy, patient preference type thing. So if a patient comes in to me and says that they just don't want to do, like they can't do the stretches or whatever, I will 100% say, I will actually, and it's funny, there's right downstairs from me, there's a PT that I actually really trust. He's really good. I'll just say, go down and see the PT, and he'll do the exercises with you. And I think that if you have a good working relationship with a PT, or like a chiro PT relationship, there's a lot of guesswork that gets kind of taken out, I guess. So like if the PT were to send me somebody and they say, oh, hey, I've been treating this person for low back pain and we've been doing these like core exercises, blah, blah, blah. But I find that the L5, S1 joint just doesn't want to move. Can you give them the old rack 'em, crack 'em? And I'm like, great. You know, I'll go in there, do my own little exam, but I kind of already know what I'm looking for, right? I'm not just like walking into a minefield. I'm going in there being like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. It's like you're going on a safari and you know there's going to be tigers and lions, but you're like safely away. You're like, oh, look over there. It's over there. Hey, man. And the opposite goes for the PT, where if I'm treating somebody and I'm like, hey, I've been mobilizing this person's low back, but it just doesn't want to hold. Can you do dead bugs and Supermans and blah, blah, blahs and whatever? So I think that it's a really beautiful relationship between PTs and chiros. I think that there's a lot of unnecessary animosity between us because there is this like kind of idea that we're in competition with each other. I would say on like some level, like on very much the surface level, that like that might be the case. But again, I don't want somebody to come to me if they're not comfortable. If they don't want to go to a chiro, I don't want to see them. Like, you don't want to sell the thing you do to somebody who doesn't want to buy what you do. But if they're, you know, needing a chiro and then they go to a PT and even the PT's like, hey, yeah, you got to go see this chiro because you need your segments moved or whatever, then I think that they're much more trusting, I guess would be a good way to put it. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to with patients, is they just have to trust you. And you have to be trustful. Like if you do weird stuff that doesn't make sense to them, they're not going to trust you. And they won't believe in your recommendations and blah, blah, blah. So I've always believed in not wanting to dominate the room, shall we say. I am perfectly fine with saying that you should go to a PT for this particular situation, blah, blah, blah. I'm not the answer to all questions, but I do my best to at least be like a resource, if that makes sense. Anyway, I've really focused on that. So then the next part of this would say that the hip flexors are tight, the glutes are inactive, and the upper back are stiff. This is very reminiscent of upper and lower cross syndrome, which is super common in Americans. I'll probably put a picture up here, but it's the idea that there's this X pattern. I think I've talked about it in previous videos. The X is there's going to be two muscles that are overly tight, and then there are going to be two muscles that are very surface level explanation of this. Is a little more deeper than that, but two muscles that are way too tight, two muscles that are just not inactive, or that are just inactive. You have to exercise the two that are inactive. They may not necessarily be weak, but they're definitely not engaged. And once you get them engaged, that's when you notice that after you go to the chiropractor and you get adjusted, that's when it like holds and it lasts longer and all that stuff. And if you don't stretch the muscles that are super tight, then doing those movements is not going to feel very good. And then you kind of get stuck in this little loop of you don't want to exercise because it doesn't feel good. And because you don't exercise, that's why it doesn't feel good. And around that carousel you go. So that's something that has to be addressed by your PTs or your chiros, depending on however it is you want to treat it. And it's good that the physio kind of brought that up. And or I guess maybe it wasn't the physio that brought it up, but it might have been the brother's girlfriend. Thank you, brother's girlfriend. You did a great job. And so she says, and she told me. So this must all be from the point of view of the physio. And I do agree. So focusing on the low back is kind of a negative sum game, shall we say. Obviously, you can do a lot of treatments to the low back and it will feel good. But if you never address the core component of the problem, which in this case is the lower cross syndrome, which is the hip flexors and the glutes and the hamstrings and the quads, if those never get addressed, the low back pain will just keep coming back. And that is because if you do not address the core of the issue, you are going to have the same thing keep popping up. And the way I like to look at it is the reason that you feel it in the low back is because the legs themselves have very big joints, and the big joints can take way more of an impact, way more abuse before they actually start to complain, I guess is a good way to say it. The low back, the lumbar spine, has a lot of very tiny joints. A lot of people just think the only joint of the lumbar spine is the disc. There's a lot more than that. There's the facet joints, and obviously not in the lumbar joints. Hopefully not. I'm sure there's some exception, but there are no ribs that go down there. Even the floating ribs, they have their own little joints that can cause problems in that like lower thoracic spine, which some people consider low back, whatever. There's just a lot more going on down there than you think, and the facet joints are notoriously fickle. Or not fickle, but they're notoriously sensitive to being in situations that they don't like. And if you have like a true facet syndrome, yeah, it don't feel good. It's definitely not a very good feeling. More often than not, when somebody has low back pain, they're probably feeling like a facet syndrome type stuff. And that can be caused by segments that are next to it not moving properly. Definitely attacked it from the right angle, and I can really appreciate that. And again, they go over the fact that, only stretching is not going to fix your problems. I'm just going to tell you that right now. If you are not an active person, if you don't go for walks, if you don't exercise, if all you do is sit around and only stretch It's not going to work. You'll feel better in the moment, but it will come back. You have got to exercise. You have got to solidify the muscles that you have. You have to work out. It doesn't have to be the gym. You don't have to get bulky. You don't have to go to Olympic levels of athleticism. You just got to do some simple stuff like body weight squats. Walking is fantastic. I love, any posterior chain type stuff, the Nordic trunk lift or whatever it's called. That one's a bit awkward to do at home per se, but that one's fantastic, which goes into the very last thing that this person was talking about with the posterior chain. So the posterior chain are all the muscles that are on the back. You could simply say, again, there's a lot more nuance to it, but we're going to just keep it simple. There's a lot of low back muscles that just almost never get activated, and that's because as a society, as not a society, but as a species, humans are designed to go forward. All of our muscles that go forward are significantly stronger than the muscles that make us go backwards. So at a very base level, humans are very comfortable with going forward and doing things in front of us, but we don't really do things behind us, which is why it involves so much like slouching type side effects, because the muscles in the front will get overly tight and the back muscles don't get activated at all. Rows are really good posterior chain exercises because when you pull back on the bar, whatever you want to call the thing, the grip thing, what that does is when you bring the shoulder blades back, all of the muscles in that thoracic spine area in the mid-back have to tighten to keep it from, to pull your shoulder blades closer to each other, which is the exact opposite movement of like a slouch. Because when you slouch, the shoulder blades actually roll forward. And I will say that he who controls the thoracic spine controls the angles of the spine. Everybody gets very, very obsessed with lumbar curve and cervical curve. And obviously they're super important, but it's very, very, very difficult to influence those angles if you do not work with the thoracic spine, because the thoracic spine is directly attached to both of them. I find that to the detriment of people's situations, they're always thinking about the posture of the neck, because they say they slouch and the head comes forward, and then they'll go to a practitioner and they'll say just bring your neck back, but they don't ever like address the tightness in the pecs and all that. So now all of a sudden you have this person like doing this, which this isn't comfortable. Inevitably, that person's going to just put their head right back because the mid-back never gets loosened up enough to the point where they can actually just do this whole bring the shoulder blades back. Because in my opinion, if you just bring the shoulder blades back, the neck follows, and you don't even really need to think about it. At least in my case, because it'll be like this: if you bring the shoulder blades back, the neck really just doesn't have another option because it's not attached to anything else. Because you have this open movement of the skull. That's the way I like to look at it. I'm sure there are other people that can explain it in a way that's less dumb, but that's something that I always bring up with my patients who have like a postural problem. They're always talking about doing like chin tucks to help with their headaches, because a lot of times people that do a lot of slouching will have a lot of headaches. Make sure you talk to your physician before you self-diagnose yourself. I find chin tucks to be not a very comfortable exercise. I'm not super into them because I don't really think they work the way people think it works, because you don't address the thoracic spine part. Stretching suboccipitals is really good, but if you never address the other part of it, it's just going to kind of keep coming back. So again, I guess the moral of this whole story is address the core cause of your problems. If you don't, well, then you probably just wasted your time. Or maybe you didn't waste your time, but you didn't get as much bang for your buck as you could have, I guess is my way of putting it. First comment: I'm starting to find the same, but with neck pain and PT, cervical medex. I do have an old injury, a dislocated shoulder, and I think is the impetus, but with standing, PT, exercise, etc., I'm finally starting to see results to get back to my pre-major flare-up feeling. Still hurts, but so much better than it was 2 years ago. I had to quit riding bikes, and I wasn't sure if I ever could again. Just totaled it up and rode almost 120 miles this week on top of lifting weights. That's the kind of stuff, that right there, that's the bee's knees right there. Sorry I used that language. That's the kind of stuff that I love to see. My main concern is, again, not necessarily pain. When you go to the chiropractor, pain is a huge part of it, but I think any good chiro worth his salt is more interested in what is the main reason you are here. Obviously, pain is a main driver for a lot of things, but people will deal with pain. People will do whatever they can to not do something about their pain the majority of the time. Men especially. We're famous for it. We're super dumb, just testosterone-filled idiots a lot of times. And when they start to feel pain, you're like, I'll just kind of ride through it. It'll be fine. And the problem is a lot of times you're right. Like a lot of times you can just kind of push yourself through the pain and your body will take care of it at some point. But there's a lot of times where that's not the case. And if it's an injury that sets itself in concrete inside your body, that's when you're going to start having a lot of these like little fringe weird things. And that's, generally speaking, the point where it stops you from being able to do something in your life that you really enjoy doing. What is that? Depends on the person. Can't go golf. You can't hang out with your grandkid. You can't dance. You can't use your favorite spatula while you're cooking. I've heard so many random weird things. But if the chiropractor or the PT or even the doctor is not asking you what makes you you, like what is something that you like, if they don't care about that, then they're missing the point. I know a lot of people out there who do things that are not good for them and it causes them pain, but they're willing to deal with it as long as they can do the thing that they like to do. What is that? It could be tap dancing. I don't care. Like, it doesn't, the actual thing itself, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, let me phrase that. But if you're doing something that you know isn't good for you, but you just find a lot of joy in it, well, then it doesn't matter. A lot of people will just deal with that, the repercussions of that. But as long as they know it's the case, then I think a lot of people tend to be like, they're like, yeah, that's fine. Just do what you can to keep me going as long as possible, or whatever it happens to be. Pickleball's the current one. I see a lot of people trying to do pickleball, and it's just, man, their shoulders. Whew, man, let me tell you, I'm putting some shoulders back in place. But yeah, in my honest opinion, what this comment is kind of elaborating on, or helping me elaborate on, is that it's not just pain. You got to think about what is it on the lifestyle that is, like, why are they there? Like, treat them like a human being. You just don't just look at them like a chart of things you're just like checking off. You're just like, okay, well, what is why emotionally, why is this person here? And yeah, that's something I always think about, is it's not pain. It's almost never pain. Here's another comment. This is actually really relatable, especially the lower back taking the load for everything else part. A lot of people go down the route of treating the pain directly, chairs, adjustments, etc., but miss what's causing it in the first place. The hip flexor glute imbalance you mentioned is something so many desk jobs create. Yeah, brother, you ain't whistling. You ain't whistling Dixie on that one. Also liked what you said about stretching alone not being enough. The combo of activating, strengthening, just moving through the day is what seems to stick long term. Glad you stuck with it those 6 months. That consistency part is the hardest. Stories like this help a lot of people who feel stuck. Yeah, 100%. Echoing exactly what I'm saying. I'm assuming that this person, I don't put their names in the things, but doctor is at the beginning of his name, so I assume he must also be probably a chiro, or at least a physio. Yeah, I do agree on all accounts on this one. I do think that people try to buy, I call them doohickeys. Everybody's always interested in the magic doohickey that'll just take their pain away, but then they just won't do the most basic thing of just getting up and walking around. It's mind-boggling. But I guess that's capitalism in some ways, whatever. Listen, I love capitalism, don't get me wrong, but yeah, sometimes it goes a little too far. Yeah, I will say that don't focus on chairs. Don't focus on only getting adjustments. Like, adjustments are insanely important for just a variety of reasons. But if you are not doing the movements on your end that are, something that help you stay moving and alive and all that, well, then you're missing half the fight, in my opinion. And yeah, I will say the consistency part, make sure you're just consistent with it. It's easy to get sad, I guess, like to get frustrated and just like a lack of results. Pain stinks. And like I always like to say, nobody likes being in pain. And if you do something once and it doesn't immediately take the pain away, I think a lot of people kind of lose hope. My general rule of thumb is especially when somebody comes to see me, just to see if chiropractic is like the way to go, is on the first or second visit, depending on whatever is happening, right? If I do something and then they get up and they don't feel any different whatsoever, I'm like, okay, my eyebrows are instantly kind of going up. I'm thinking, well, maybe you don't belong here. I usually at least try it like 2-3 times. And if I do everything I can think of on all the areas that you are having problems with and you get no change whatsoever, immediately I'm like, all right, we got to get you somewhere that might actually be more helpful. But if you're going to go to do something for like, let's just say 12 visits and that you're not noticing any difference the entire time, well, then again, I don't think you're in the right place. Yeah, it's just a good idea that if you go to a practitioner of any kind, make sure they're going for causes, not symptoms. Chasing symptoms is a fool's errand. It does make you feel better, and it is important. Like, if you go to a chiropractor who doesn't address the symptoms in some way, well, then that alone is, like, obviously not great. But if they are not trying to figure out what the core of your problem is, then I don't think they're paying enough attention. And not to disparage my own industry, I guess. There's definitely some chiros out there that do that. I think, there's bad everything. There's bad plumbers. There's bad people who, there's bad cooks, it doesn't matter. There's always going to be bad something or another's out there. And it's the only, since I'm in that industry, I guess I could be the most hypercritical of it as opposed to other medical professions, because I do see it from the inside out. Most chiros are absolutely, I will say, yep, definitely most chiros are in it for the right reasons. They do want to help you, but sometimes you just get lost in the sauce, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're just busy, and sometimes you just miss something. It happens. But I think I answered that one pretty well, so let's go to the next question.
Alrighty. Stupid chair. All right, so second question. I guess not really a question. This one seems more of a statement, but I figured that this was something that would be good to talk about, at least in regards to self-improvement, which I think is important to think about. I don't think it should be ignored. Let's put it that way. So the question goes, it was clear that I was the problem. I had this problem that I kept chasing after people who were ignoring my calls. I think the problem was that I was too attached to certain people. It was kind of a recurring thing that people started ignoring my calls. Then I spoke to a colleague about this, and she told me not to chase after people. I should be okay by myself. The need to talk to other people all the time is a compulsion that I should come out of. If people call you, then that's great, but don't chase after people. It was clear that I was the problem. And then there appears to be a quote. The same problem reoccurring means you are the problem. I don't know how to say that. It's like Sadhguru? This is a super interesting thing to think about. I know that I've been guilty of this. I think most people at some point in their lives, I say most people, have at least a moment in their life where they realize that they are, I guess, chasing after people in a way that's probably not healthy. There's definitely a compulsion in the human condition that makes you want to feel like you're liked. I mean, nobody wants to go about their day and think like, oh man, nobody likes me. And a big issue that we have in America, I can't speak to the whole world because I haven't lived in the whole world, but in the US, there's definitely this issue of extreme defensiveness where if somebody has some kind of criticism of you, instead of potentially taking it in stride and thinking about maybe why it is that they said what they said, even if it isn't necessarily super, I don't know how to say it, but like somebody who doesn't aggressively try to tell you something that is bothering them, a lot of times people will take it defensively and they'll take it as like a personal strike on their character. I will say that the best people in the world that I've met, and they're pretty rare and in between, somebody you can tell, hey, this is probably something you should improve on, and instead of immediately taking it as an attack on their character, they're like, okay, maybe I don't agree. Maybe I do agree. Maybe this is something I've been working on. Whether they're actually working on it or not, actually, for the most part, isn't even really important. But I do think that people who can take criticism in a way where they don't immediately get defensive about it, I think are an interesting breed. Because I think that if somebody's coming at it from a good, from like a place of goodness, I think that being told something that you are not good at is actually a sign, or I think it's a benefit. Personally, I like it when people tell me when I'm doing something wrong, and my first impulse is to at least try and listen. And I think even the act of listening in itself will give you a lot of the, I don't know if validation's the word, but a lot of the benefits that you might be looking for, just because of the fact that people don't want to talk to people who don't want to listen most of the time. Again, there's always exceptions, but there's unhealthy behavior no matter where you go. But what does this have to do with chiropractic? Well, I think a lot of times when people get super stressed out from the mental stresses in their life, it's because they are pursuing or being involved in relationships, whether that's romantic or friendship or co-workery type stuff, that produces just an unnecessary amount of stress. And when your body is constantly in that state of fight or flight or trying to release cortisol and blah, 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 then I think you are priming yourself for pain. And I think that even though we're not only interested in pain as chiropractors most of the time, it's important to realize that the mental state, which definitely is one of the main components of being with other humans, because being with other humans can be very stressful. I don't think there's anybody out there I've ever met who doesn't think sometimes, man, people kind of stink. People are kind of mean, and they're difficult to be around, and it causes me some undue discomfort. I don't think there's very many people that would argue that. But I do think that if you approach that aspect of the human experience and you are not trying to push yourself into a place that you really shouldn't be because the other people kind of are just not reciprocating where you are, it's an important thing to realize that either you go find some people who do, or you try and figure out from an emotionally intelligent place, why is it that maybe people don't like to be around me? And I will say that one of the best ways to control pain levels, especially from a mental aspect, is to find what I like to refer to. I didn't coin the term. It's definitely out there, but they call it the third space, a place where you can go where it's not work or home, and you need to get involved in some kind of community. And community has been proven over and over again to help people control their pain levels. It certainly helps them control their mental stresses. And I think you'd be hard pressed to tell me that getting a good hobby where there's people you like hanging out with is not a good thing for you. If you want to argue that is not the case, you're probably the kind of person I don't want to be around. But I will say that if you are constantly finding yourself in a place where you find that other people don't like being around you, it may not necessarily be a reflection of you, it might be a reflection of them. But I would definitely, for sure, at least stop and think, okay, well, maybe why is it that people don't like me? Do I have some bad habit that I do? Do I tend to over engage with them? Do I have some kind of issue where I'm not very good at respecting boundaries or whatever? And it's easy, in my opinion, to always think about it as somebody else's fault, where you're like, okay, well, I couldn't go there because all these people hate me. And then as soon as, in my opinion, I've always been in a situation, if I've ever been in that situation, which has happened plenty of times, I think everybody has. If you're ever in a position where you are only considering the other person as being mean for seemingly not a very solid reason, which can happen. I mean, not to say that it doesn't happen, but if you're only thinking about it from the other person, from the perspective that they're just kind of a jerkhole or a jerkwad, then I think that you're kind of missing the opportunity for a lot of self-improvement, because you might be able to figure out, well, okay, well, maybe I could have handled that better. Maybe there's something I could do better. Maybe I could be more considerate. Maybe I could do whatever, right? And you don't have to tear yourself apart about it, but I do think that it gives you the opportunity to find a sort of a compromise, I guess, where you can personally improve your own mental well-being by just kind of firming up the castle inside your head. Because the only thing that allows anything to get into your head from a mental standpoint is yourself. So if somebody says something mean to you and you just disregard it, it doesn't affect you. But if somebody says something mean about you and you let it bother you, that's when it tends to bother you. And Marcus Aurelius says that the fortress, he says something along the lines of the fortress of the mind, the only weakness of it is the only way to get into it is you letting it get to you. Now, it's a lot easier said than done. Nobody's perfect enough to totally disregard everything that people say about them. But I do think that there's some wisdom there. And I think that it's a very good idea to always try and consider what is it that you could do to help yourself. And in a weird way, that actually does really help out with a lot of the chiropractic principles, because if you're not being stressed out by the mental aspect of your pain causers, I guess, or even just distress, then, I think you're missing an opportunity. But I don't know, kind of preachy, but I do think that it's just important to think about, your self-discipline. That's what it's called, self-discipline, for a reason. That's something that I try to do myself. Am I perfect? No, but I do try to be okay at it. At least okay. All you got to do is be okay at it. You don't got to be perfect. You just got to kind of be okay. That's fine. Not a big deal. All right, so let's do some comments. I went through something similar, and it kind of hit me, that I was trying to get validation from people who were not really showing up, learning to sit with my own company. Felt uncomfortable at first, but it slowly made me less reactive to who replies and who doesn't. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to look at it. I think that people like Paul, RuPaul. So if you listen to RuPaul, who's a famous drag star, one of the most compelling things I ever heard her say was, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? And I do think that if you are not feeling a very strong foundation in your own mind, then if you try to expose yourself to other people and have them try and use the mortar to fill in the cracks of your own psyche, I think that you're going to probably be very disappointed. It's a good idea to be able to be alone. And the best people, and again, this is all my opinion, but if you have somebody you really like being around, I find that most of the time it's the people that can be okay with being by themselves. In the world of nerddom, if you're playing something like D&D, like Dungeons and Dragons, the best players for your group, if you're running it, the best players for your group are the people that also run games. They're like the actual other GMs, people that are GMing for other people. Those are the best players to have in your game, just because of the fact that they understand what it is that you are going through, and they will usually try to engage on a level that's a little bit more involved than somebody who's only playing as a player. And I think that's because they understand the work it takes. And I think that's a pretty good analogy, because I think that if you are trying to improve yourself, the people that have tried to improve themselves as well will understand and see that in some regard, even if they don't consciously realize it. And those are the people that make the best kinds of friends, in my opinion. I know that when I think about the people that are my best friends since I've moved up here, I definitely went through a couple friend groups who were just kind of like not reciprocating what I was trying to do. And there's nothing wrong with them. Again, like I was saying, from a viewpoint of trying to be with others, an incompatibility is not necessarily a poor reflection of you. It's a poor reflection of just different values. And is there anything wrong with them? No. Do I agree with everything that they do? Also no. But does that mean that they are incorrect because I think I'm correct? No, because I may not be correct. It might just be one of those incompatibility things. And if you are trying to constantly force the compatibility with two things that just don't fit, like if you just take two puzzle pieces that just don't want to like work, right? Then yeah, I think you're doing yourself like a waste of time. I think it's a disservice, and you probably should just move on. And I think that unfortunately there's a lot of people who are constantly seeing the world from a point of from like a lack, or from a scarcity mindset is what it's called, which is not great to do with people, at least as far as emotions go, because a lot of times you'll see that with like relationships, in romantic relationships, where people will stay in a relationship they really shouldn't be in much longer than they should be, because they think, oh well, I'll never find anybody else that might be for me. And that's looking at it from a scarcity mindset. So like technically speaking, if you were like, you can't necessarily find somebody else who might want to be with you if you're with somebody who doesn't actually want to be with you. So you are not really looking for somebody who might want to be with you. And it kind of has this like self-perpetuating like loop of you're not ever going to be happy because you're not willing to like take that like scary step. And it's important. And I like romantic relationships is a whole nother like point of discussion. So don't take it as like you should. I'm not one to be like you should break up with somebody as soon as you don't agree on something. I'm definitely not like that. But I do think that it's important to remember it's not a good idea to try to sell to somebody who doesn't got what you got to sell. Sell to somebody who wants to buy what you got. Don't try to sell to somebody who's not buying. That's how I've always tried to look at it. And I think I've used that quote somewhere else as well. I agree. You are repeating some patterns that you learned at an early age. Your trigger may be that the person ignores you for a while, and then you start chasing them, and this dynamic is familiar with you, so you repeat it. When you learn to stay with the unpleasant feeling of being ignored, then the change begins. Well, I would say that this is a pretty profound comment, just because of the fact that a lot of times, if you feel like somebody's ignoring you, you feel a compulsion to like want to like message them again. It's on the male side of I guess it might be both sides. I've never been a female, so I can't necessarily. I don't know what the habits and the keywords are for the female chasing the male. But when like with guys, I always told myself as a rule, and it's like not a hard or fast rule. Of course you should do it every once in a while, but I was determined to never double text. That means that if I were to text somebody something, it might just be like a response to whatever they say, or ask them a question or something simple. If I am waiting for a response for it, what I would try to do is think, okay, well, it's very unlikely that they haven't seen the message, right? We always try to like throw these extra things in to see like, oh yeah, they probably just haven't read my message, even though it's been 36 hours and it's definitely a notification on the front of their phone or whatever. And I think that if you are constantly chasing after the kind of person that doesn't want to read that message, you might actually be really compatible with that person, but do you want to be with somebody who's not really that good at communication, shall we say? And I think that it's a good idea to always try to be the person that throws the ball in their court. And if they don't want to play, then you just walk away. And I don't think it's a big deal. And I think that if you learn this pretty valuable skill, a lot of times the tension from your emotional entanglements with other people who are friends or romantic or whatever, I think that it gets a lot easier in my regard, or in my thought, because of the fact that you're just not trying to roll the boulder uphill. Don't be a Sisyphus. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. At least when it comes to something like this. But obviously, like don't like cut people out of your life. It's not a good idea. You need people in your life to make you happy, but you just need to find the right people. And are the majority of the people on the earth not great? There's definitely some room for improvement, shall we say. But I do think that if you are constantly in the muck, trying to dig up muck, you're going to find muck. And I don't think it's a good idea to purposefully surround yourself with that. That's just my thought. But anyway, yeah. So this might be a bit of a shorter episode, but obviously with this like bone thing going on, I'm not necessarily in the. I don't know if I have the brain power to like want to do anymore. But yeah, guys, thank you for listening to this. The reception to this seems pretty good. People still seem to be liking it. So go ahead and comment down below if you learned anything from this. I think that the philosophical point of view for these kinds of questions is actually pretty useful for a chiropractic standpoint, just because chiropractic involves a whole holistic approach to the body, and if you're just miserable because of some kind of emotional thing, you're gonna go to the chiro because you're probably gonna have back pain, and that's just something that happens. And ain't nothing wrong with it. Ain't nothing wrong with you. That's just being a human. Welcome to the human experience. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. I'll talk to you guys next week, and I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful week. You beautiful, beautiful person, you, and keep it popping out there. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.